Hi everyone, Professor Snart here, just checking in. It's Monday as I'm recording this, so our next due date is coming up on Tuesday, July 19th for Unit 7, which is Worldly Encounters. Sounds kind of spacey and odd at the same time. I guess calendar-wise and unit-wise, as you can see from our due dates list here, we're actually getting, and again, it's sort of unbelievable, we're past midterm now, and that came up pretty quickly, so we're really actually getting towards the end of our course. We begin to move, actually, in this unit into a slightly more, I guess, modern feeling kind of literature, but of course it's not contemporary in ways that we would necessarily read a contemporary novel, for example, but we're getting closer to a more contemporary time period. You can sort of be the judge of whether that makes things easier necessarily, or in fact modern, capital M modern, efforts to kind of dislocate the reader in ways that older literature didn't necessarily try to do. In fact, it sometimes worked the opposite. Those modernist attempts at dislocation actually make more contemporary reading slightly more difficult, if not a lot more difficult. But you can sort of experience that for yourself as we get into the last few units of the course. For Unit 7, there's just a couple of kind of interesting things that I wanted to comment on, and they're not related, but the first reading we have is from the Japanese traditions, the Tale of Genji, sometimes called the first novel ever written, although it certainly shares a lot in common with what we think of as contemporary novels, but very different in lots of ways too. One of the differences that I think is particularly, again, intriguing in this sort of reading is that despite the fact that we have our textbook that we read from, and we just sort of take for granted that, yeah, it's a textbook and you flip the pages and that's how a book works. But think about something like the Tale of Genji, and I have a good picture in the unit here that you can look at. It's the scroll of the tale of Genji that's, this is how it appeared when it was first written or produced. And we often forget how the sort of mode that we encounter a work of literature, whether it's a book, or if you read on the computer, or if you read, I don't know if you've ever read something like a scroll, but in fact the operation of how that works can sometimes affect the way that we engage with the text, not just physically because we have to hold it differently, or it works differently for our eyes because we can see multiple pages or we can only see a part of a page. But I want you to really think about the degree to which, if you had something in scroll form where you could unroll it a little bit at a time, or in fact, if you have the space, you could unroll a whole bunch of it, how that might affect the reading of it, and even if you want to sort of back up from there, how the mode of production, in this case, whether it's a book or a scroll or something that's going to appear digitally on a web page, how in fact that conditions the way in which it's written to begin with. So you wonder if the novel doesn't emerge from this scroll tradition in some ways because of the way that very tradition operates. And we think of a novel as kind of unfolding before us, which is really what a scroll can do. Ideally, it unravels before us and things sort of proceed down this linear path. Again, just one of those things that we sort of forget, like the physical structure of the thing that we engage with often has had some impact on the way it was written, the content of it, the style of it, and then, of course, the way that we engage with it, it affects that as well. Even though we often, either consciously or just subconsciously forget about that and get to the so-called content of the book as if that is somehow separate from the physical sort of material reality of it. The other interesting thing is not particularly connected with that idea, is within Unit 7, we also have a reading from very famous European author, Michel de Montaigne, who coined the term the essay. And so it's obviously come to mean something fairly specific for us, particularly in terms of education, as this, pretty common assessment device in English courses and other courses as well. So one of the things that I want you to think about as you engage with that work, or think about now that you already have maybe, is the degree to which, again, Montaigne's sense of an essay from the verb, the French verb that really means more like attempt or try, how that sort of element of exploration has been lost in the modern essay. And I don't for a second blame students or blame the writer for this. It's really a condition of, and I guess actually this is a way in which sort of larger conditions shape, our engagement with the text or what we try to do or what we try to write about. How that sense of exploration or trying something out in an essay is in some ways the last thing that you want to do in a formal academic essay, which really needs to proceed from a clearly stated thesis. Here's my support. Here's the conclusion. So it's almost an argument that doesn't allow for a maybe or a what if, or I'm not sure about this, but here's a possibility. It's certainly, I wish we could recapture that sense of exploration, but clearly that then becomes really difficult to assess in any sort of objective way. So Montaigne provides us the tradition of the essay as we know it, but our modern essay, and again, largely because of the kind of context that it's used in or that it shows up in, that we are now familiar with it in, the function of the essay is really so different. Montaigne, I think, might be a little bit horrified at the way we use the essay now because it does limit the writer so much in terms of exploring questions that don't have answers or suggesting possibilities for ideas that aren't necessarily sort of consistent throughout a unified essay. So our academic essay has its tradition back to Montaigne, but its function now and its kind of mode of operation is really a lot different, which you might have experienced reading his, and then of course thinking about producing yours for this unit, but really for all the units, we're locked into that much more academic use of the essay as well. So a couple of interesting things to think about for Unit 7. And again, past Unit 7, we really do get into a little bit more of a sort of contemporary feeling literature. So you can think about whether that makes it more or less accessible. Again, one of those kind of conundrums that we run into in World Lit is that often the oldest and or the most distant from us in terms of geography even can be the most accessible, the most intriguing, the most interesting, can maybe speak to us more so than something that's actually much closer to us in terms of time or geography. You wonder why that is. Again, any questions about things, just be in touch with me and I'll talk to everybody soon.